Old 6 Funny End of World Survival Daily Life. The world has entered a world of survival in the sea of ice, starting with a floating ice and relying solely on salvaging supplies. Discovered host facing apocalyptic threat. System down. The system has encountered a game firewall attack. The system has taken down the game firewall. Chen Mo couldn't open the system, but the world became strange and seemed to have changed some rules. The distant ice blocks are calling out, coquettishly. Get me, get me, get me, get me. I have wood. I have wood. I have a pork rib can. I have a pork rib can. There's a cover. There's a cover. Wood, canned pork ribs, and a hood. Equals. Chapter 1, System and Firewall cannot have both. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The cold sea surface, sheets of ice drifting with the waves. The cold wind blew by, causing Chen Mo to shiver and open his eyes in a daze. The endless sea. Pieces of floating ice. He sat up in shock, feeling his butt cool. He lowered his head and saw himself sitting on a 2-meter square ice floe. And when did you put on a cotton jacket? I can't cross the ice age, can I? Suddenly, a stream of light flashed by, and a fishing net appeared out of thin air on the floating ice, almost 1 person tall, with a slightly larger net pocket at the end than the basin. Chen Mo was a bit curious and picked it up to take a look. Obtained, fishing net X1. Description: fishing or retrieving ice cubes from the sea, which contain survival supplies. Subtitles appearing in consciousness. Chen Mo realized that there was indeed a bit of magic in this world, and he could survive by following the prompts. He wrapped himself tightly in a cotton coat, rubbed his hands to keep warm, and looked at the floating ice in the distance, hoping to obtain heating supplies from inside. Otherwise, after the temperature drops in the dark, this cotton jacket alone is likely to freeze to death. The recent piece of ice is several tens of meters long, and it takes at least 10 minutes to float over. Based on their flow rate, it only takes 2 to 3 minutes to salvage. Chen Mo secretly calculated and suddenly heard a cold electronic sound in his consciousness. At the same time, subtitles emerged. Welcome to the Ice Sea Survival World, where the only purpose of players is to survive. Description: 1. Floating ice is a prerequisite for your survival. You can expand and manufacture floating ice, but you need sufficient tools and materials. 2. The resources in this world are very rare, but they are rich in variety. You can never imagine what materials are hidden in the next ice block. 3. This place is much more exciting and dangerous than what you see now. Death in the game is real death. Reminder: hungry sharks are searching for food, and it's dangerous to be targeted by them. Chen Mo instinctively looked around and saw a triangular shark fin breaking out of the sea, making a bend, and running towards him. Wipe. Just say it and come. Chen Mo was a bit caught off guard. The triangular fish fin was half human high, and the whole shark collided. The floating ice had to be shattered. Fortunately, the shark circled around the floating ice several times without launching an attack, but it didn't swim either, just wandering a few tens of meters away. Chen Mo tried to stay calm as much as possible. To survive, he must understand the gameplay of this game. Suddenly, a chat window came to mind. The communication channel has been opened. Go and take a look, maybe you can get important intelligence. Can you still communicate with other players? Chen Mo is looking forward to it and will check the chat content immediately. Am I not dreaming? Why did I wake up and go to the sea? It's so cold. Collect ice cubes quickly. I found wood in the ice cubes that can ignite a fire. Can ignition occur on floating ice? If this game allows ignition, it will definitely be fine. Besides, it's still daytime, and it will be even colder when it gets dark. If it doesn't light up then, just wait for it to freeze to death. How did it ignite? There's no lighter. You can directly synthesize a fire pile by going to the manufacturing interface. Is there a manufacturing interface? Chen Mo's mind moved and a player panel appeared. In addition to the communication channel, there are also two options, transaction channel and manufacturing interface. He doesn't rush or get impatient, just click on it in order. Trading channel. Can trade materials with players, no universal currency, barter, building items cannot be traded. So it's like this. Chen Mo looked down and saw that a player had already suspended the transaction. Stone X1, trading, wood X1. Mud X1, trading, wood X1. Obviously, everyone is trading wood for heating. In addition to wood, fresh water and food are also quite scarce, and these living supplies are probably more expensive than gold now. Shake your head and Chen Mo opens the manufacturing interface. With composite graphics and corresponding materials, you can create anything. A long synthetic list pops up. Small wooden hammer, wood, 0/2. Barbecue, wood, 0/3, grass ball, 0/1. Small iron bowl, metal, 0/2. We urgently need a barbecue for heating, at least get 3 pieces of wood and a clump of grass first. Chen Mo looked towards the sea, and a large piece of ice was just approaching. Ice cubes come in different sizes, but the fishing net's net pocket is only the size of a basin. Ice cubes that are too big are difficult to retrieve, but there are probably more supplies inside. Chen Mo rubbed his hands and waited for the ice to come closer and salvage a wave. Suddenly, a huge red subtitle flashed through my consciousness. Error. Sleeping trough. What is the situation? Is there a bug in the game card? Discovered host facing apocalyptic threat. System down. The system has encountered a game firewall attack. The system has taken down the game firewall. Chen Mo stared at me. System. Did you cheat yourself? Destroyed the game firewall, this system is amazing. Chen Mo looked expectant and felt it carefully. He found that his body had not changed much, and there was no system interface in his mind either. It seems like nothing happened, right? Suddenly there is an ominous feeling. The system will not perish together with the firewall, will it? Despair. Chen Mo sat on the floating ice with a dejected expression on his face. Ouch, my head. An old voice came from under my buttocks. Before Chen Mo could react, he heard another chaotic cry in his ear, like a group of chattering little yellow people. Get me, get me, get me, get me, get me, get me. Chen Mo frowned and looked for a voice. In front of him, besides the undulating sea, there were only a few dozen pieces of floating ice, big and small. Is that pile of ice talking? He felt like he might be suffering from delusions, and his ears were full of teasing me, teasing me. And the closer the ice is, the louder the yelling like a yellow person becomes. No matter what the situation is, we'll catch them first. Chen Mo grabbed the fishing net and wondered who to start with. Unexpectedly, his action made the ice cubes scream even louder. Get me, get me, get me, get me. I have wood, wood. I have mud, mud. I have a pork rib jar, pork rib jar. What about these ice cubes and their supplies? Great. But what the hell is a pork rib jar? Pork ribs, canned. Chen Mo is excited. Is there really a can in the ice? He perked up his ears and carefully searched for the ice cubes that made the sound of pork ribs jars. At the next moment, the target is locked onto a basketball-sized ice block with sharp edges and corners. Let's catch it first before we talk. Chen Mo caught the ice and hit it right in the middle. Hello, hello, hello. It screamed excitedly even after being caught, and Chen Mo retrieved it and directly pinned it to the floating ice under his feet. With a bang, the ice broke. Hit my head again. Chen Mo was stunned for a moment, then there was that old voice again. Can the floating ice under my feet also speak? Without considering so much, Chen Mo glanced at the broken ice and vaguely saw a metal object inside. There are really cans. He was so excited that he jumped and perked up his ears to continue listening. The ice drifts fast, he can't salvage all of it. Whoever has good supplies, salvage them first. I have wood, I have wood. Just you. Chen Mo took out a net bag directly. I have grass balls, grass balls. Satisfy you. Ice cubes filled with grass balls were also brought up. Suddenly, a voice attracted Chen Mo. I have fish, I have fish, I have fish. Food. We must get it. Chen Mo followed the sound and saw a large ice block, 3 or 4 times the size of an ordinary ice block. There's probably more than one fish inside. He aimed at the edge of the floating ice and pulled it back with a forceful pull. That floating ice saw Chen Mo struggling, and even excitedly cheered him on. Go on, go on, go on. Chen Mo dragged it to the side of the floating ice and pulled it up directly with his bare hands. Hee 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 hee. Come here, you. The ice fell to the floating ice with a thud, and the floating ice underfoot screamed loudly as it was smashed. Ouch ouch ouch. That's too much. Chen Mo looked at the floating ice, but it didn't crack. Regardless of it, his hands, frozen white, gripped the fishing net and quickly searched for new targets. I have ice, I have ice, I have ice. Damn it, isn't that cat just empty? I have mud, mud, mud. Let's talk about it later. I have pictures, I have pictures. Diagram? Chen Mo was pleasantly surprised. Could it be that there was a composite image inside? He made a quick decision and grabbed it with a net bag. Got it. Chapter 2, In order to eat without sacrificing one's life. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a bang. The ice cubes are stuck on the floating ice and will shatter directly. A blue blueprint was exposed, but it didn't crack along with the ice. Obtained, Broken Ice X2, Icehouse Composite Map X1. The composite image has entered your composite list and can be viewed at any time. Composite images that have not been added to the composite list can be sold. It is indeed a composite image. Chen Mo didn't care to be happy, the ice in front of him was about to drift past. We must hurry up. He gripped the fishing net tightly with both hands and retrieved the ice cubes when he heard important supplies. In a moment, the floating ice was almost piled up. The remaining ice cubes gradually drifted away, and Chen Mo felt a bit regretful. Those ice cubes were even more regretful. Done, done, done. No chance, no chance. Disappointment, disappointment, disappointment. Chen Mo shook his head and looked into the distance. After a while, he could still encounter a piece of ice. Don't worry. Anyway, he can hear the sound of ice cubes talking now, and every time he can salvage the most important supplies. Ouch ouch ouch. It's too heavy. It's going to sink. Huh. The floating ice under my feet is talking again, and this time it's a warning. Chen Mo took a closer look and found that the floating ice had indeed sunk a bit. The buoyancy of the 2 meter x 2 meter floating ice was not enough. The top priority is to expand the floating ice. Before he could open the synthesis list, that old voice would urge him. Stinky kid. Quickly break down the ice and expand me. If you don't hurry up, I'll crack open. Don't forget to make a small wooden hammer first. Ice destroyed and people died. This is not for fun. Chen Mo quickly followed the instructions of the floating ice to break down the ice blocks, saving him the trouble of even looking at the composite image. Unexpectedly, the decomposition speed is extremely fast. As long as you pick up the ice and move the thought of decomposition, it will become a material. Obtained, Crushed Ice X2, Wood X1. This is very easy. Continue. Obtained, crushed ice X2, grass clump X1. Obtained, crushed ice X2, canned pork ribs X1. Obtained, crushed ice X6, little sea fish X3. Surprisingly, the largest ice cube contains 3 small sea fish. Earned it. Chen Mo didn't care about being happy and quickly broke down all the ice blocks, picking up a small wooden hammer made of wood. Small wooden hammer, wood, 2 halves. Sufficient materials. A faint light flashed past, and 2 pieces of wood were missing from the floating ice. At the same time, a small wooden hammer appeared in Chen Mo's hand. He was about to make floating ice when he suddenly heard a scream. Ah! Help! There's a fish nibbling on me. I'm going to crack open. Fish. Of course, this is what the floating ice under my feet said. How big a fish can chew and crack the floating ice? Anyway, first scoop them up, they are all precious ingredients. Where is it? Hurry up, kid. They're right behind you. Chen Mo rushed to the edge of the floating ice and looked down. Suddenly, he was speechless. A few small sea fish as big as palms could chew open the floating ice. Ignoring roast, he aimed at a net and fished it up, and at once caught 3. Obtained, little sea fish X3. The other small sea fish were scared away, but the harvest was also quite impressive. Ha! I'm glad you're quick, or else I'll be bitten down by them. Chen Mo was speechless for a moment, and suddenly he felt that the floating ice under his feet was quite unreliable. Even a trivial matter could make it say the end of the world. However, in order to prevent it from really sinking, Chen Mo decisively chose to manufacture floating ice. But when he looked at the composite picture, he was worried. Floating ice, crushed ice, 10 out of 10. Explanation: a 1 meter x 1 meter floating ice has average strength and is afraid of heat. I only have 20 pieces of broken ice on hand, so I can only build 2 units of floating ice. Okay, making an extra piece is 1 piece. Chen Mo immediately chose to synthesize and quickly expanded the 2 meter x 2 meter floating ice to 3 meter x 2 meter. He had just finished, and the floating ice under his feet was no longer willing. Why did you make 2 pieces, kid? Do you think all the broken ice falls from the sky? Then don't be idle and continue fishing. Chen Mo was speechless. Did he come to survive or did he work for the old floating ice under his feet? Ignoring it, Chen Mo squatted on the floating ice to form a barbecue fire. Barbecue, wood, 3/3, grass ball, 1/1. All materials are complete. Synthesis. With a loud bang, a barbecue fire ignited on the floating ice, and a wave of warmth instantly hit. But then, an old scream came from under my feet. Ah! Help! It's on fire! Chen Mo covered his forehead with a hand. The floating ice clearly only melted a small layer, and this guy seems to be dying. Can you be quiet for a while? Can you stand grilling you with fire? I really want to be roasted by the fire now. At such a young age, I feel so heartbroken for my lack of empathy. Chen Mo is speechless. He is only curious about one thing now: can others hear ice talking? If others can't hear it, then your system is working. It's definitely not possible to directly ask someone, just go to the communication channel and listen to the news. Chen Mo roasted the fire, opened the communication channel, and the messages were continuously refreshed. Damn it! I'm freezing to death. Who has wood? I'll exchange crushed ice. Joking. Who is so short of broken ice? The ice I salvaged has broken down into broken ice, and after being busy for a long time, I ended up with a broken grass ball. Chow Tan trading to me. Do you have any human nature? Just a clump of grass and you want to take it away. You should be content. I have salvaged a pollutant from my cat, and there is a chance of getting sick near it. Is there any risk in salvaging ice cubes? This is killing players to the death. Seeing this, Chen Mo completely understood. No one can hear ice talking except oneself. My advantage lies in me. Now players are busy collecting wood and food, and no one wants broken ice at all. Coincidentally, they need to expand the floating ice. Take this opportunity to purchase a wave. Chen Mo, little sea fish trading crushed ice. As soon as the news came out, the communication channels exploded. Sleeping slot. Did I read it right? Someone traded food for crushed ice. Is this for charity? Crushed ice must have other uses. If you keep doing this, you'll starve to death. Whoever cares about other uses, I'll buy it. I'll make 10 crushed ice. I'll give you 12. Chen Mo smiled, and what he wanted was this effect, but this little bit of broken ice is not enough. This is food, so it's not possible to give such a small amount of worthless broken ice for trading. Spell. I'll give you all the broken ice, a total of 25 yuan. Chen Mo shook his head, feeling that the price could still rise. Sure enough, in less than 5 seconds, someone is willing to offer 30 yuan. More is probably not realistic, it's not that no one is willing to bid. The main reason is that the other party's broken ice may only be so much. However, the next moment he received a private message. Brother Zhu Daio, sell it to me, I'll give you 60 pieces of crushed ice. Chen Mo was stunned. Chen Mo, where did you get so much crushed ice? I smashed 2 square meters of ice floes. Sleeping trough. Fierce person. For the sake of eating, don't waste your life. Chapter 3, The barbecue reminds me to add wood, old ice is urgent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With Zhu Daio's desperate determination, Chen Mo decided to make a deal. He sent the transaction information and the other party completed the transaction instantly. Successful transaction, obtained, crushed ice x60. A large expanse of broken ice appeared out of thin air behind Chen Mo, followed by a burst of mournful cries. Ouch! You hit my head again. Chen Mo looked at the floating ice and said, don't shout, it's for your expansion. This is quite similar. Chen Mogong calmed the floating ice and heard another scream. Wow, ah. Don't leave the broken ice by my side. It's too cold. I'm almost going out. Chen Mo was slightly taken aback, how could the barbecue fire even speak? There is too much broken ice, and a few pieces have already been piled up next to the barbecue fire. The weak small flames are in danger. Don't make any noise, I'll move away now. Chen Mo shook his head and immediately expanded the floating ice with broken ice. As the broken ice disappeared, the floating ice expanded from 3 meters x 2 meters to 3 meters x 4 meters. When he was building, he kept listening to the old floating ice under his feet happily stealing and laughing. Now that the area of the floating ice is already large, Chen Mo returned to the barbecue and grilled a small sea fish, but it seems that he needs a barbecue rack. Okay, first open the can and place it next to the fire to heat up. The flames on the grill shook and spoke. I'm almost extinguished, can't you add a piece of wood in before baking? Before Chen Mo could speak, the old floating ice under his feet stopped drying. What? Adding wood? If you want to make me miss, just say it. Can you heat Chen Mo's canned food without adding wood? Wait a moment. His name is Sunken. Oh my god. It's too unlucky. Sunken, you can replace it with a floating ice disaster. Chen Mo is speechless. How did these two guys get involved in their argument? He decisively added a piece of wood to the grill, accompanied by an old ice flow's pig-like scream, and the grill burst into laughter. Old man. Let you say Chen Mo. You deserve it. You also shut up. Chen Mo felt his ears making noise, so he opened the synthesis interface to see if there was a composite image of a barbecue grill. There really is. Simple barbecue rack, metal, 1/4, wire, 0/2. Description: only one portion of food can be baked at a time, and it should be placed above the grill for use. Do you need iron wire besides metal? Chen Mo checked and found that one piece of metal can be used to synthesize an iron wire. That is to say, if you want to create a simple barbecue grill, you need to get at least 5 more portions of metal yourself. He looked up and saw another pile of ice approaching, and could already vaguely hear their cries. Someone, 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 someone. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Still the funny voice of the little yellow man, connected and chattering. Chen Mo smiled slightly and prepared the fishing net. At this moment, the old floating ice suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Not good, there is. Shark. Fish. Sharks. Where? Chen Mo looked around and didn't see the shadow of the shark just now. It's down there. Suddenly, there was a muffled thud from under my feet, and the entire floating ice shook violently, almost causing a small sea fish to fall. Chen Mo quickly picked up the small sea fish and pushed other supplies into the middle of the floating ice, followed by another muffled sound. The shark hit the ice floe again. Chen Mo was fortunate to have expanded the ice floe, otherwise the 2 x 2 ice floe could have been directly knocked over by sharks. Next, the shark collided several more times and finally swam away in disappointment. Ha! He breathed a sigh of relief at the same time as the old floating ice, and it was safe. At this moment, the ice block had already approached 2 or 3 meters, and the chirping of voices made Chen Mo frown. Get me, get me, get me, get me. I have mud, I have mud. I have plastic, I have plastic. Chen Mo asked for metal, but his voice was too dense to hear clearly. He simply shouted at the ice, who has metal? I have it, I have it. I have metal, I have metal. Metal, metal, I have metal. 7 or 8 pieces of floating ice responded at the same time, and Chen Mo worked hard to distinguish the direction. As soon as he found the target, he caught it. Bang! 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 Accompanied by the melancholic cries of the old floating ice, blocks of ice were pressed onto its body. Give me a little lighter. Chen Mo didn't care about these things and quickly scooped up the ice cubes. When those metal-filled ice cubes were all scooped up, he focused on a large ice cube again. No matter what's inside, make sure to drag it back. Seizing the right moment, Chen Mo slammed and hit. Then, he pulled back hard and pulled closer, using all his strength to pull it up. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. I'm going to float over, I'm going to float over. I have pictures, 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 pictures. Composite image. This must not be missed. Chen Mo caught the fishing net and almost missed it. He pulled it back, threw it onto the floating ice, and then looked at the sea. The other floating ice had already drifted out of the fishing range. But there was still the urgent cry of ice cubes in my ears. Get me, get me, get me. Chen Mo followed the sound and saw that 2 small ice cubes were blocked by floating ice and did not drift away. Another benefit of expanding the floating ice is reflected in the possibility of blocking a few ice blocks every time it is salvaged. Chen Mo smiled with satisfaction and directly pulled them up. Next, decompose. Obtained, crushed ice x2, metal x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, metal x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, stone x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, grass ball x2, baseball hat x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, large barbecue frame composite x1. Baseball cap. Is there a composite image of a large barbecue grill? The harvest this time is really not small. Chen Mo first picked up the hard frozen baseball cap and looked at it. The black one was not thick, but it was better than not having a hat. The only problem is that you need to dry this thing first, but you can put it on a barbecue grill to dry it. Let's take a look at the composite picture of the large barbecue rack first. Large barbecue grill, metal, 8/10, wire, 0/6. Description: you can bake 3 portions of food at a time and use it above the grill, which is very efficient. This is much better than a simple barbecue grill. Large capacity, high efficiency, but consuming too much metal. After being busy for a long time, Chen Mo was also a bit hungry. He decided to eat the canned food first, and then endure it. He saved enough metal to build a large barbecue rack, and then he could grill small sea fish to eat. At this point, the canned pork ribs are almost hot, and even if they are not fully heated, they should not be pulled out and cooled. Chen Mo picked up the canned food and a strong meat aroma hit his face. The outer layer of the can has melted, and there is still some ice residue inside. Chen Mo was not affected either. It would be great if he could eat canned food. He pulled out a pork rib, stuffed it into his mouth, and even ate all the crispy bones with meat. Beauty! Chen Mo carried the cold wind behind his back, smiled contentedly, ate while opening the communication channel to see how others were doing. Help! My ice floe was knocked over by a shark. Wipe. My ice floe was bitten by a shark and broke into 2 large pieces, leaving only 2 meters x 2 meters. Who has food? I'll trade wood for it. Who has water? You don't need to trade water, do you? Just hold on to the broken ice and chew on the ice shards. Don't you have stomach pain? Ouch! I must have a stomachache. I really pulled on the ice floe, and the food that came out froze directly. Sleeping slot. Disgusting. Can you consider the feelings of those who are eating? Chen Mo was speechless for a moment and quickly flipped back to find a glove seller. Whoever has food, I'll trade a pair of gloves. We must get it in our hands. If we keep working bare-handed like this, our fingers will soon freeze. Chapter 4, Wang Ba Tuo. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chen Mo immediately searched for the other party's ID and sent a private message asking for the price. Chen Mo, I'll trade your gloves for a little sea fish. 2. Chen Mo, just 1 piece. 2, 1 is not enough to eat. I'm sorry, I don't want it anymore. Wait. I'll add a piece of metal for 2 fish. Chen Mo, isn't this even worse for me? Forget it, I don't really need gloves either. You're so generous, let's deal with someone else. Chen Mo doesn't believe it anymore. Who is willing to exchange food for something now? If it weren't for knowing the supplies inside the ice and the reminder from the old floating ice, I wouldn't have been able to get so many small sea fish. It's even harder for others. Sure enough, in less than a minute, the other party found it again. Brother, I'm trading a pair of gloves, 3 parts of metal, and 1 part of glass for 2 small sea fish. Isn't that too much? Metal happens to be needed by oneself, while glass has not been encountered by oneself so far, so it should also be relatively rare. It's not a loss. Chen Mo, come on, trade. As soon as the other party saw him nod, they immediately sent a transaction message. Successful transaction, obtained, thread gloves X1. Suddenly, there was an extra pair of gloves and 4 materials around me. Thread gloves. Description: ordinary thread gloves have a slight warming effect. Chen Mo shook his head slightly, feeling that this wave seemed a bit lacking. Okay, it's good to wear it. He put the gloves on his hand. It's okay, but it's still somewhat useful. Next, Chen Mo traded 5 pieces of metal with a small sea fish. We have gathered all the metal needed to make a large barbecue grill, and there are also 2 extra parts of metal that can be used to make small iron pots, melt broken ice, and boil water to drink. Perfect. Chen Mo became busy. He made it directly above the grill, first consuming 6 parts of metal to synthesize 6 iron wires, and then synthesizing the barbecue rack body. Soon, an all-metal barbecue grill was completed. It has 4 supporting legs and a metal mesh made of a row of iron wires at the top. Chen Mo synthesized a small iron basin slightly smaller than the basin, put a small piece of crushed ice in it, and when the small sea fish was roasted, put the iron basin on the grill and boil water. 3 small sea fish were simply processed by him and then thrown onto the barbecue rack. The meat of the small sea fish gradually softened, but because there was no place to hide from the wind, it would take some time for them to fully roast. Chen Mo crouched on the floating ice, baking a fire, and faintly heard something moving. It's so heavy. It's too heavy. What is complaining about? The sound was very faint, obviously not from the old floating ice. Chen Mo listened carefully again and suspected that the sound came from below, coming from the sea. There must be something down there. Below the sea surface, I'm sure I can't see it myself, but... He suddenly remembered the old floating ice under his feet and knocked on it, asking, "Old floating ice, did you hear any sound?" Snoring, snoring. Chen Mo was speechless for a moment. Is this old guy pretending to sleep? Okay. You wait. Without hesitation, Chen Mo picked up a piece of wood and threw it into the grill. Ah. Are you still adding firewood to it? Stop pretending. Chen Mo looked at the old floating ice with disdain on his face and ordered directly, "Look at what's talking under the sea." Wait, I'll take a look. The visibility of this seawater is too low. Don't be verbose. I have seen it clearly. It's a stone tablet carried by Wang. Chen Mo almost fell off with a thud. Why don't you take a good look and say it again? I'm so old, can't I still have presbyopia? I've seen it clearly this time. It's a turtle carrying a box. A turtle carrying a box. A treasure box. Perhaps. Where is it? Under me. Chen Mo immediately grabbed the fishing net and must not miss the treasure chest. He suddenly inserted the fishing net into the seawater and asked the old floating ice, "Speak up quickly, give me a direction." You move a little to the left. Chen Mo immediately moved to the left. Go deeper. Chen Mo extended his fishing net downwards. I'm about to hit your net. Hold on, don't move. I bumped into it, close the net quickly. Chen Mo immediately pulled up the fishing net and felt a bit heavy. He almost slipped under the floating ice. He quickly stepped back and forcefully pulled the fishing net onto the floating ice. With a muffled bang. Click. Oh my goodness, you really smashed and cracked me open. Chen Mo turned around and saw that he had brought up a black metal box. One corner of the box was embedded in the floating ice, and a small crack opened along the spot where it penetrated. Damn it! Can it really crack open? Chen Mo was a bit panicked and said, "Speak up. How can we repair the cracks?" Pour fresh water onto the crack. Old floating ice screamed heartily, and Chen Mo couldn't get fresh water for a while. He had to first remove the small sea fish from the barbecue rack, place the small iron basin on top, and wait for the ice to turn into water before using it to fill the cracks. Fortunately, this crack is not too deep, and the floating ice will not crack for a while. Chen Mo felt a little relieved and then remembered to ask old floating ice, "Where has the turtle carrying a treasure chest gone?" Your fishing net is so small that it can't be caught, of course it ran away. Do you still have the mood to ask this? I'm about to split in half. Chen Mo chose to ignore it. This old guy always talks so exaggerated. Anyway, the ice is already heating up and can repair the cracks in at most 10 minutes. Why not take a look at what's inside the treasure chest first? Chen Mo approached the treasure chest and the introduction information popped up. Frozen iron chest. Explanation: the frozen iron chest can open up more rare items. Rare supplies. Reliable. Chen Mo immediately opened the treasure chest. A faint light flashed past, and a pile of supplies appeared beside him. You have opened the frozen iron chest X1. Obtained, glass X2. Obtained, metal X2. Obtained, granite X2. Obtained, spike meteor hammer X1. The materials that explode are all rare materials, and there is even a finished weapon. Chen Mo looked surprised and immediately checked the spike meteor hammer. Spike meteor hammer. Description: between the metal grip and the sharp spherical hammer head, there is a chain of iron that is over 1 meter long, which causes terrifying damage. The damage of knocking oneself down is also terrifying. Pretty. Chen Mo picked up the meteor hammer and pulled out the metal handle to cool it. He looked at the floating ice with a crack and decided not to try playing with it for the time being. If you accidentally break the floating ice, it's not worth the loss. Put the meteor hammer aside first. Chen Mo looked at the small iron basin, and the broken ice in the basin had already melted halfway. The cracks can be repaired immediately. He roasted the fire, gently shook the iron basin, and suddenly heard old floating ice let out a terrifying scream. Go. Life. Come on. Shark. Fish. Ah. Come on. Come on. Come on. Chen Mo turned around and a blue-tail fin broke through the sea, charging towards his own floating ice. The huge body is still floating upwards. Chapter 5, Entering the Night. Cool down. You are listening at novelfull.audio. That was a completely blue shark, and with its sharp head exposed to the sea, Chen Mo actually saw 4 round black big eyeballs. What's so special? What kind of monster is this? Did you grow up drinking nuclear wastewater? Before it could react, the huge shark opened its bloodthirsty jaws and, like sharp teeth, fiercely bit into the floating ice. With a loud bang, the floating ice is shattered. My mother, ah! Pain! Chen Mo, what are you doing? The old floating ice let out a mournful howl. Even the barbecue fire was so frightened by the shaking of the floating ice that it screamed loudly. Chen Mo's ears were so sore from the shock that he couldn't let the sharks continue to destroy the floating ice. Dare to dismantle my floating ice? Damn you! He picked up the meteor hammer, tried to stabilize his momentum, and swung a hammer towards the shark's forehead. With a thud, the sharp spikes of the meteor hammer pierced the shark's skin, causing its body to tremble violently, creating a torrential current and causing the floating ice to shake violently. Chen Mo tugged hard, pulled back the hammer, and the shark plunged into the sea, but then turned around and charged back. Why do you dare to come? Chen Mo aimed as hard as possible and swung it with a steady force. The pointed tip of the meteor hammer swung out with a buzzing sound, piercing the black eye of the shark. Pain, 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 pain. Sleeping trough. Chen Mo actually heard sharks shouting pain. He was stunned for a moment, and the shark suddenly plunged into the sea and ran away. Damn it! Let it slip away. Chen Mo picked up the fishing net, picked up a portion of the broken floating ice, and quickly repaired it. Old ice floe. How are you doing? Are you feeling better now? I'm fine, it may not work anymore. Chen Mo turned around and found that the small iron pot had been overturned by the previous vibration, and fresh water had spilled all over it. He sacrificed himself by roasting the fire. However, upon closer inspection, he realized that the previous crack had disappeared. It seemed that as long as fresh water flowed through, it could be automatically repaired. Chen Mo didn't have time to deeply mourn for the barbecue, so he retrieved wood and grass balls, lit them, and prepared to continue grilling fish. Unexpectedly, as soon as the flames rose, Chen Mo heard a familiar voice. Azu! I'm freezing to death. Who splashed water on me just now? This is clearly the same life as the barbecue fire just now, which was lit twice. Chen Mo shook his head, wondering if it counted as life or not. Place the previously grilled small sea fish halfway on the barbecue rack, grill it for a while, and a faint aroma wafts out. Chen Mo flipped the fish over in time. Just now, when he touched the side of the barbecue rack, it had already been grilled until it was golden and slightly burnt. At this moment, Chen Mo looked into the distance, and there were no floating ice blocks nearby. He estimated that he would not be able to obtain new supplies for a while. Okay, I happen to have eaten the grilled sea fish first. Not long after, there was already a small sea fish that was ripe. Chen Mo picked it up and didn't have to be afraid of being hot. By the time he handed it to his mouth, it was no longer hot. Slow movements may also cool down by the cold wind. After taking a bite, it tasted delicious and delicious. The outside was roasted until it was crispy, while the fish inside was still fresh and tender. The only problem was that the taste was a bit bland. After all, there was no seasoning. But being able to eat such delicious food at this time, Chen Mo is already quite satisfied. He was eating and suddenly heard a lewd laugh from the floating ice under his feet, hee 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 hee. Chen Mo stomped his feet and asked, "Old floating ice, why are you laughing?" "I just saw the shark that was gnawing on me and was eaten by another big shark." Sleeping trough. Chen Mo couldn't be happy. The shark just now was at least 4 or 5 meters long. How big is the shark that can eat it? Chen Mo suddenly felt that it was necessary for him to continue expanding the floating ice. He was not in the mood to enjoy the delicious food anymore, so he quickly stuffed the other 2 small sea fish into his stomach, placed a bowl of crushed ice on top, and placed the hard frozen baseball cap next to the barbecue grill, continuing to expand the floating ice. After being busy for a while, he expanded the 3 meter by 4 meter floating ice to 4 meter by 4 meter. Chen Mo originally intended to expand another circle, but unfortunately there was not enough broken ice. Looking into the distance, a pile of ice is approaching. This wave is more salvaging, and the broken ice can at least expand the floating ice into an area of 4 meters by 5 meters. Chen Mo clenched the fishing net with an expectant expression on his face. With the gloves on, he felt less drawn. Quickly, the ice block heard a yelling like that of a yellow person. But their personalities seemed different from those ice cubes before. "Not good, not good. Someone. Don't catch me, don't be caught. It's over, he's leaning over." Chen Mo frowned and said, "What's the situation? I don't even want to catch them. How can I know what they're carrying?" "Got it." Chen Mo smiled slightly and shouted at the floating ice, "Who has mud? I want mud." No. I'm wood. I'm a shell, no mud, don't catch me. I'm Chow Tan, not mud. Hee hee. Chen Mo already knew what was inside some of the floating ice, so he aimed at the supplies he wanted and grabbed them. Bang! An ice cube screamed and was pulled up. You're lying. I'm wooden. Bang! The force was too strong, and the ice directly shattered. Chen Mo vaguely heard the old floating ice shout and let out a vulgar sentence. He didn't care at all and rushed to retrieve the necessary supplies. In no time, 7 or 8 ice cubes were scooped up by him. There's one last chance. Chen Mo doesn't ask anymore, just aim at the largest ice cube, no matter what's inside, make a profit. He pulled back hard and brought the large ice block up close. At this point, the other ice cubes had already drifted out of the salvage range, but this time 2 ice cubes were still stuck at the edge of the floating ice and were directly carried onto the floating ice by Chen Mo. Next, it's time to draw. With a slight smile, Chen Mo began to break down one by one. Obtained, crushed ice x2, wood x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, shell x1. Obtained, crushed ice x6, small sea fish x1, sea shrimp x2. It's done. Today's dinner is ready. This sea shrimp is about the length of a palm, quite plump, not much smaller than a small sea fish. With 3 ingredients added together, it can barely eat enough. Chen Mo was a bit curious about the usefulness of that shell and picked it up to check the introduction. Shell. Description: an important material that can be used to make armor. Can you synthesize equipment? Not bad. Chen Mo set the shell aside and prepared to expand the floating ice with freshly decomposed broken ice. Just then, a string of prompt messages popped up. Game announcement: it will be dark in 6 hours. Players are advised to prepare the necessary items for the night as soon as possible. If there are no protective measures, you may become an ice sculpture if you fall asleep. At the same time as the announcement appeared, Chen Mo's communication channel interface automatically popped up. Who told me what to prepare before nightfall? Chapter 6, 2 People, Fierce and Evil. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It must be warm supplies. Otherwise, it will definitely freeze into popsicles. I came up with a solution. First, I will synthesize 4 ice walls to prevent wind and create several grass mats to put inside. Next to them, I will light a barbecue fire, which should last until dawn, right? Can this work? Is there no other way? It seems like there's really no other way. Yes. Making a quilt. But we need cotton, so I only found 1 portion of cotton. A quilt requires 10 portions of cotton, not including fabric. Let me make a grass mat instead. Watching a warm-hearted player propose a cold protection plan, Chen Mo shook his head for a moment. But obviously there is no better way. Okay. I have my own icehouse composite diagram, so there's no need to build an ice wall with air leakage above my head. As for the bedding, we can only make some grass mats like everyone else. Chen Mo opened the manufacturing interface to view the required materials. Icehouse, crushed ice, 16 out of 100, freshwater, 0/4. Introduction: a hemispherical small ice house, very sturdy, with an arched entrance and a relatively small interior space, providing a windproof effect. Grass mat, grass rope, 0/2, grass ball, 6/6. Introduction: a cool mat usually requires several sheets to be used together to provide warmth. To synthesize a grass rope, 2 grass balls are needed. After calculation, a grass mat requires a total of 10 grass balls. If you lay 3 layers below and cover 3 layers on top while sleeping, at least 60 grass balls are needed. Chen Mo rubbed his temples, feeling like the workload was huge. Calculate by salvaging around 10 ice cubes each time, and salvage at least 5 or 6 times before dark. As long as we can gather enough grass balls, as for the broken ice used to make the ice house, it will definitely be enough then. Chen Mo looked into the distance and found a large piece of broken ice approaching. He leaned over to the barbecue to catch fire, warm his hands, and wait for the ice to come close to salvage in the best condition. Never let go of a grass ball. He secretly made plans, but he heard the old floating ice under his feet humming and screaming, like a toothache. Old floating ice, what do you call? Oh my, there's a group of little shrimp gnawing on me. Chen Mo suddenly regained his composure. At this moment, the ice block was still far away, so why not take advantage of it and salvage some small shrimp? Where are they? Down there. So many, so many. A lot. Chen Mo is not calm anymore. According to the old saying of floating ice, he can easily catch a lot by himself. He immediately clenched his fishing net and scooped it under the floating ice. Buckle on the floating ice. A bunch of shrimp was thrown out. They are still bouncing around one by one. The only problem is, they are really too small. A net of them is not enough to hold a bowl. Even the smallest mosquito is still meat. Chen Mafe quickly caught up again. Obtained, Xioxiami X61. Continue. Obtained, Xioxiami X57. Obtained, Xioxiami X41. Obtained, Xioxiami X22. Obtained, Xioxiami X3. Chen Mo salvaged more than 10 times in a row, but couldn't catch the last one before stopping. He didn't care about tidying up these little shrimp because the floating ice block across from him was about to come over. Chen Mo quickly roasted the fire, but the fire pile was not willing anymore. I'm almost extinguished. Can you add a piece of wood before you start the fire? Don't worry about it anymore, turn around and destroy it. I'll resurrect you. What? Ha ha ha. I finally don't have to be roasted by the fire. Old ice flow, don't gloat. Everyone shut up. Don't delay me from salvaging the ice cubes. Chen Mo roared, both of them were honest. Finally, he could hear the sound of the ice on the other side. Get me, get me, get me, get me. I have wood, I have wood. I have grass balls, I have grass balls. Just you. This wave of ice cubes is very compatible, and Chen Mo hardly put in any effort to salvage all the ice cubes containing grass balls. The remaining ice drifted away, and he began to decompose. A few minutes later, Chen Mo nodded in satisfaction and obtained 11 grass balls and 22 pieces of crushed ice. The harvest is not bad. Looking up, Chen Mo decided to first create a grass mat as the ice blocks in the distance would take a long time to float over. He first synthesized 2 grass ropes, and then used 2 grass ropes and 6 grass balls to synthesize a bedsheet-sized grass mat. This thing looks quite rough, and the warmth effect cannot be said to be lacking, it can only be said to be negligible. Without 2 or 3 floors, it's really equivalent to not having any. After being busy in the cold wind for a while, Chen Mo felt a bit cold. He took a piece of wood and stuffed it into the precarious fire. The flames suddenly grew in a circle, and then the old floating ice began to curse and poke in secret. Chen Mo ignored it and collected all the small shrimp in a small iron basin, then put a piece of crushed ice and threw it on the barbecue grill to bake. I'll be hungry for a while, so I'll just drink this bowl of shrimp soup. It's warm and can replenish some moisture. However, Chen Mo speculates that the taste may not be very good. He roasted the fire, rubbed his hands, and waited for the broken ice in the small iron basin to melt. However, at this moment, a seabird in mid-air swooped down and suddenly flew over Chen Mo's head, accurately pecking at the floating ice. Ouch! It hurts! The old floating ice shouted loudly. Chen Mo was slightly taken aback. Is this seabird here to peck at the ice? Upon closer inspection, he realized that the seabird was not pecking at ice, but rather a few small shrimps he had missed. He took it. How could a seabird find such a big little shrimp, even after struggling to find it on its own? Really? There's one more. Aim. Dive. Sleeping trough. Chen Mo was shocked to find that he had heard a seabird talking. Although this matter was quite ordinary for him in the awakening system, he couldn't help but feel a bit surprised when he heard the seabird say so few words suddenly. With a sudden sound. The seabird circled half a circle, dived down, and pecked at the old floating ice. With a loud cry, Chen Mo saw clearly that the seabird had accurately picked up a small shrimp. It's delicious. Is there anything else? Look for it again. Chen Mo was stunned for a moment and suddenly had an idea. Hello, little bird. I'll give you shrimp to eat. Can you tell me if there's any floating ice in front of me? Before Chen Mo could finish speaking, he saw the seabird suddenly tremble and plummet a long way down, as if frightened. Oh my goodness. Can you understand what I'm saying? Being able to say this means being able to communicate normally. Chen Mo became interested and directly pulled out a few small shrimp from the small iron plate. Tell me what you saw, all these shrimp are yours. Upon hearing these words, the seabird fluttered its wings and circled above Chen Mo's head, flying and shouting at the same time. Try one first, I'll try one first. Stop it. Tell me something, I'll give you a little shrimp. One too few. 3. Anyway, the shrimp is not big either, so it's okay to give a few more. Chen Mo looked at the seabird above his head and saw it open its mouth, as if thinking about something. A few seconds later, it spoke. There is a floating ice in front of you, and there are 2 people on the ice. They are so fierce and terrifying. A piece of floating ice. 2 people. Fierce and vicious. Chen Mo suddenly had an ominous premonition that the other party could not be an allied pirate, could they? Chapter 7, Discovering Colorful Ice Blocks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Eat shrimp, I want to eat shrimp. I know. Chen Mo generously threw down 5 small shrimp and stepped back. The seabird flapped its white wings and took a dive down. Accompanied by a scream from the old floating ice, the seabird flew up with shrimp in its beak. Now, old floating ice is not willing. If you want to eat, eat. Why do you have to take a high-altitude dive every time? Afraid. Bad people will catch birds. Chen Mo looked at the fingertip-sized peck marks on the old floating ice and felt very helpless. In order to avoid the old floating ice constantly complaining, he placed the remaining 4 small shrimp on a piece of wood. Come here to eat, I won't catch you. Chen Mo retreated and the seabird tentatively landed, glancing at him with the big bean eyes. Immediately after, the little one lowered his head and swallowed a shrimp, realizing that it was not in danger, and then pecked all the shrimp into his mouth. Probably because the food was too delicious, the seabird actually took the initiative. Great person. What else do you want to ask? This attitude is very cooperative. Chen Mo nodded in satisfaction and gave it a few small shrimp. Fly over and see what's on the floating ice of those 2 people, mainly to see if they have weapons. Also, tell me how far they are from here. This time, I'll give you 50 shrimp. Upon hearing 50 of them, the little seabird was so excited that it flapped its wings and almost accidentally fell off the wood. But then, it used its orange-pointed mouth to pick up its own little paws, as if counting how many problems it was and whether it was at a disadvantage. Chen Mo waited helplessly, and after half a minute, it seemed to have figured it out. Great guy. Deal. It quickly ate up the small shrimp on the wood, flapped its wings and flew away, gliding towards the distance. Chen Mo looked at the shrimp in the iron bowl. It was okay, enough to make soup. Next is waiting for the little one's news. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Chen Mo checked the manufacturing interface and found that there were too many supplies now, so randomly stacking them on the floating ice was taking up too much space. After looking around, he found a composite diagram of 2 storage boxes. Hard ice storage box, crushed ice, June 6, magic crystals, 0 to 1. Wooden storage box, wood, 6 out of 6, magic crystals, 0 to 1. Obviously, wooden storage boxes are more reliable, but no matter which one you make, you need to get a magic cryolite. Chen Mo decided to keep an eye out for this material next time he salvaged the grass ball. Turn off the synthesis interface, look up, and the little seabird flies back. I saw it. It's so scary, so scary. We need to add shrimp. Add shrimp? What exactly has this little guy gone through? Chen Mo first threw a few small shrimps onto the wood and curiously asked, "What did you see? Are you so scared?" The little seabird fell down and first ate a small shrimp to suppress its surprise. As soon as I flew over, they used a net bag to catch me and almost got plucked and roasted. Roast a little bird? Chen Mo instinctively swallowed his saliva, startling the little seabird and flapping its wings as it was about to run. Don't run. I pointed at you and sent me intelligence. Come back and have some shrimp. Chen Mo threw a few small shrimp on the wood again, and the little seabird circled around his head several times before daring to probe and land. Then it ate shrimp while talking about what it saw. There is a lot of broken ice, a dozen grass clumps, and a few other messy things on that floating ice. Do they have weapons? Yes. 2 spears. How far are they from here? It's so far, it'll take 2 or 3 hours to get closer. Upon hearing that it would take such a long time, Chen Mo was somewhat disappointed. If the other party really dared to hit him hard, he would use a meteor hammer to teach them how to be human. By the way, robbing pirates. I am worried that the grass ball is not enough. The pirates who come to my door have no reason not to turn against a wave of looting. However, Chen Mo feels that it is unreasonable for the floating ice on both sides to get close. Normally, everyone is floating on the sea, and their speed should be almost the same. How could they meet? Do you have any objections? Chen Mo was slightly surprised. An old voice came from around, but it was not an old floating ice. He looked around carefully and didn't notice what was talking. At that moment, the voice rang out again. Don't look, I'm the ocean. I'll let you float as I please. The sea? Chen Mo looked silently at the shimmering sea, unsure of what to say for a moment. Indeed, it can flow as it pleases and cannot control itself. He still wanted to communicate with the sea again, thinking about how to establish a good relationship with this vast and constant neighbor, but the other party did not respond. After a moment, the old floating ice said, the sea sleeps for 23.5 hours a day, and most likely it's time to sleep. Chen Mo was speechless for a moment. Can you sleep so well? In contrast, he prefers the old ice floe to sleep for 23.5 hours a day, so as not to startle people at first sight. However, on the other hand, if it weren't for the old floating ice, he wouldn't have caught the small sea fish and shrimp, as well as the treasure chest carried by the turtle. Okay, let's face it, endure it. Chen Mo pursed his lips and turned around to see that the little seabird had already eaten all the shrimp and was stretching its neck eagerly looking at itself. You haven't eaten enough yet? Not full, not full. Okay, I'll give you a few more. My dinner hasn't arrived yet. Chen Mo spoke and took out a few small shrimp from the small iron basin, placing them on the wood. The little seabird called out a few times, quickly ate all the shrimp, and then flapped its wings and flew away. Not bad. I haven't been stubbornly shameless, I've been wanting it. It's a bird with only a sense of proportion. At this point, the broken ice in the small iron bowl is about to melt. Just wait a little longer. After the water boils, you can enjoy the hot shrimp soup. However, he had no expectations for the taste of the soup. Chen Mo roasted the fire and looked into the distance. Suddenly, he was attracted by a piece of floating ice that was about to float. The key is that there is actually a large ice block inside that emits colorful light. Those who have played games know that any item with special effects is definitely top-notch. Chen Mo waited for the ice to approach, and when he was about a few tens of meters away, he could hear their cries. This wave also cooperates. You can tell at a glance what supplies are available. Chen Mo picked up the fishing net and carefully distinguished the yelling of these little yellow people. Before they could approach completely, he found 2 ice cubes filled with grass balls. He came to the edge of the ice floe, and as soon as the ice approached, he lowered the net and scooped it up. Bang bang! Ice falls on the floating ice. Amidst the yelling and cursing of the old floating ice, Chen Mo aimed at the large ice block emitting colorful light. Even if it delays the grass ball, he will still retrieve this colorful ice block. Offline. Got it. So heavy. Is that all for Chapter 8? Pirates. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With a splash. Chen Mo put in a lot of effort to drag the colorful ice cubes over and move them onto the floating ice. Being hit by such a large ice block, the old floating ice was in pain and screamed. My goodness! It's too heavy. I'm going to sink. Quiet. The old ice floe did shake for a while, but it was still far from sinking. He didn't have time to care about the old man and quickly salvaged the other ice cubes. Soon, the remaining ice drifted away. Due to the delay in salvaging the colorful ice cubes, only 7 ordinary small ice cubes were salvaged this time. Okay. If the colorful ice cubes could make something special, it would be worth it. Chen Mo was the first to choose to break down this ice block, but failed. Tip: cannot directly decompose. What does it mean? Do you still need special tools? Chen Mo scratched his head and curiously checked the introduction of the colorful ice cubes. Magical colorful ice blocks. Explanation: as the most rare ice block in the ocean, it can only be decomposed using a magic ice crystal hammer. After decomposition, you can obtain 100% of a high-level item, which is unique. That is to say, there is only one treasure in the entire gaming world that comes out of the magical and colorful ice cubes. Don't worry about opening the only trash, as it's 100% a premium item. Amazing! Chen Mo suddenly looked forward to it. What exactly is hidden in this ice cube? Looking inside through the ice, amidst the colorful dazzling light, there is a faint white thing that cannot be clearly seen. If you want to know, you must first create the magic ice crystal hammer. Chen Mo opened the synthesis interface, looked at the tool-class synthesis diagram, and quickly found the synthesis method. Ice hammer, magic ice crystal, 0 out of 5. Description: a hammer made of magic cryolite can be efficiently constructed, repaired, and dismantled. Good guy. Do you need 5 magic cryolites as soon as you arrive? Are you joking? Chen Mo has never seen a magic ice crystal before, let alone 5 pieces. With this magical and colorful ice cube, I can't even open it myself. He was a bit dissatisfied and pushed the colorful ice cubes to the side of the fire. They couldn't decompose, so he let them slowly melt while baking, right? However, after Chen Mo decomposed the other ice cubes, he was surprised to find that there were no signs of melting what the colorful ice cubes were like before and are still like now. Even with a small wooden hammer, it won't break, it's as hard as a diamond. It is obvious that using an ice hammer to break it up is the only way to decompose it. This is very helpless. He seems to be guarding a big treasure chest now, but he can't open it anymore. The key is that it still doesn't speak. Chen Mo looked into the distance, but there were currently no ice blocks approaching the floating ice. Okay, go ask other players if they have any. He opened the communication channel and instantly saw a massive amount of messages. Who has extra grass balls? I charge a high price. I trade food for grass balls. Don't bother, who has extra grass balls? I won't sleep tonight. Grass group. Grass group. By grass group. At first glance, 99% of the news was about the grass ball. Chen Mo was not too worried about the problem with the grass ball, and according to his own salvage efficiency, there was no problem gathering all the grass balls. However, if you have extra grass balls, it should be easy to trade magic cryolite. Chen Mo closed the communication channel and stopped asking for information. Collect as many grass balls as possible first. If there are any extra grass balls, what good things cannot be traded? Take advantage of the lack of ice now, drink the shrimp soup first, gather your strength, and try to catch more ice in the next wave. At this point, the broken ice in the small iron bowl had already melted and boiled. Chen Duan stood up and tried to take a sip. The taste is very bland, with a hint of seafood flavor, which is not tasty and not difficult to drink. He held the shrimp soup in his hand, sucking it in and out. After finishing the soup, his body also warmed up a lot. Looking back, another pile of ice drifted over. Work. Putting a portion of crushed ice into the small iron bowl, Chen Mo continued to melt on the barbecue grill. He rubbed his hands, grabbed the fishing net, and listened to the yelling of the ice cubes like yellow people. Quickly, he found the ice cube containing the grass ball and waited for it to approach, catching it in a net. Bang! Ice cubes come ashore. Without hesitation, he continued to salvage, and as his movements became more skilled, the salvage speed also became faster and faster. There were several muffled sounds, and several ice cubes fell onto the floating ice. The old floating ice continued to curse and Chen Mo ignored its noise as usual. Soon, 5 or 6 more ice cubes were salvaged. Moreover, the floating ice also blocked 2 ice cubes, shouting loudly there. I have wood, I have wood. I have a hood, I have a hood. Chen Mo was stunned for a moment. What kind of ghost is a hood? That hood? My cat is a man, what's the use of it? Although Chen Mo thought so in his heart, he still scooped up both ice cubes and couldn't use them himself. It was also good to burn them for warmth. He turned around and counted, and surprisingly, he got 16 ice cubes, which is 16 grass balls. Maintain this efficiency, add 2 more waves of ice, and the grass ball will be gathered together. If you're lucky, there will still be a few more left. He decomposed all the ice blocks one by one, and it was Chen Mo's turn to have the covered ice block. Chen Mo's expression was a bit strange. Decompose. Obtained, crushed ice X2, mask X1. Is it a mask? Chen Mo was speechless for a while, but eventually he thought too much. If you wear a mask, put it on. It has a bit of a warming effect. Chen Mo put this white mask on his face, and indeed his face warmed up a bit. Not bad. Now you can grill the fire and warm up your body. The next wave of ice cubes is here, try to salvage more. Thinking this way, Chen Mo turned around and looked into the distance. Suddenly, his brow furrowed. A small white dot appeared on the sea surface, looking like another piece of floating ice. There are faint people on the floating ice, and it seems there are 2. What 2 allied players did little Seabird see? The other party's floating ice is still approaching, and it seems like they are about to meet. Chen Mo is ready with the meteor hammer. If both sides really come together, they are likely to encounter a battle. But the probability is very small. Both sides have no long-range weapons, and as long as the ice floe is not hit face to face, almost everyone has no way to take the other party. But Chen Mo's expression became increasingly solemn. As both sides got closer, he saw someone across from him not on the ice floe. They actually have a raft. It's inevitable to have a battle. The other party clearly saw Chen Mo, and one of them pointed and waved his spear towards this side. Chen Mo is close to the edge of the floating ice, ready for battle. Never let the other party take away any of your supplies. Quickly, both sides approached a distance of less than 100 meters. A thin man on the raft was rowing desperately, shouting at Chen Mo while rowing. Listen to me on the other side. Hand over all the valuable supplies. We are pirates. Chen Mo pursed his lips. Are you really a pirate? But just like him, when he paddles the raft over, can he still have the strength to rob? Chapter 9, 3 Holes. I got 3 holes from you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the raft approached, the skinny guy across from him let out a scream of surprise. Sleeping slot. Boss. He has a hat, gloves, and a mask. What? Get it. A bald and chubby man on the floating ice behind couldn't wait, but he also threw down a raft and started rowing this way. Chen Mo carried a hand on his back and hid the spike meteor hammer behind him, waiting for the 2 pirates to deliver it to his door. Kid! You must hand over the supplies quickly. The bald chubby man let out a loud shout, paddling the raft with one hand and gripping a spear with the other. Chen Mo smiled leisurely and said, I'm warning you, if you think about my supplies again, you will bear the consequences. Ordinary people fight, 1 inch long and 1 inch strong. When their meteor hammer is swung, it is more than 10 inches longer than their spears, afraid of a ball? Stinky kid, you're quite arrogant. Second, come on. I stabbed you to death with a single spear. With a bang, the raft collided with the old ice floe. Oh my! Bastard! How dare you bump into me? Chen Mo. Let it sink. No, 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 no. I'm just a raft. I'm innocent. Sleeping trough. Chen Mo didn't expect that the other party's raft was still communicating with old floating ice. Chen Mo. Hurry up and knock over this raft. Chen Mo. Don't. Flip it over. Don't. Dude, shut up. Chen Mo was getting a headache from two guys arguing and suddenly shouted loudly, startling the skinny guy on the raft. I haven't spoken yet. I don't care if you say it or not. Before the skinny guy could attack, Chen Mo swung his meteor hammer over. What's so special? Do you dare to take action? Thin and agile, he jumped back to avoid the meteor hammer and stabbed Chen Mo's chest with a spear. Chen Mo didn't hide at all. With a flick of the meteor hammer, the iron chain directly entangled the spear. The skinny guy was startled and pulled back hard. The bald fat man rode his raft and rushed towards this place, hoping to take advantage of the situation and launch a surprise attack. At a critical moment, the old floating ice shouted anxiously, "Stinky kid. He's going to ambush you. I see it." Chen Mo still held onto the meteor hammer tightly, waiting for the chubby guy to approach and suddenly shake it. The meteor hammer was instantly released, causing the thin guy to stumble and almost fall directly under the raft. Chen Mo helped him directly. With a bang. Thin guy falling into the water. Ah! Help! Big brother! Come and give me a hand. The bald chubby man glanced at him and said, "Waste. Let me kill him before we talk." "Don't do it. How could I freeze to death?" The bald and chubby guy didn't care about him at all, risking his life to row towards Chen Mo. With a bang, the moment the raft hit the floating ice, the chubby guy jumped up with his spear. Oh my! It's so heavy. The old floating ice let out a painful and mournful cry, but Chen Mo didn't pay attention. The other party seemed to have practiced, and despite their fat, they couldn't get close when playing with spears. Chen Mo's meteor hammer hit him, and the chubby guy lowered his head and dodged directly. "Stinky kid! Bring me the meteor hammer, you!" With a flick of his spear, the meteor hammer immediately wrapped around him, and then the chubby man pulled hard, almost missing Chen Mo. "Yo-ho! You have quite a lot of strength. Dare to grab my supplies? You're done." The bald chubby man looked disdainful and said, "Just rely on you." Suddenly, he felt the spear tightened, and Chen started to work hard. The fat man sneered, as steady as Mount Tai, and pulled hard, and then he flashed Chen. He was feeling proud when his expression suddenly startled. "Sleeping trough. Don't. I'll cool you down." At the moment when Chen Mo was pulled over, the other hand picked up the small iron basin on the barbecue rack, half-melted ice water, and all of a sudden, it was pinned onto the fat man's bald head. When the cold wind blew, the fat man trembled uncontrollably, and his whole body instantly lost its strength. Chen Mo took the opportunity to kick out and the fat man stumbled down, falling directly into the sea. "Ah! Bastard! Why are you playing dirty with me? Second brother! Second brother, come and help me. I really can't swim." The bald chubby man pounced back and found his second son floating motionless on the sea, frozen stiff in such a short while. In despair, the fat man's movements became increasingly sluggish, and before he could even breathe, he was suddenly swallowed alive by a shark bigger than a bus. Immediately after, the skinny body was also eaten by it. Chen Mo watched in shock as the shark disappeared, leaving only a small patch of blood stains there. Sharks are really too big. We need to make the floating ice bigger. By the way, their supplies. Their floating ice is still approaching, more than 10 meters away, but according to its drift direction, the two floating ice pieces are likely to stagger at intervals of 5 or 6 meters. We must get that piece of floating ice and the supplies on it. Their floating ice area is only 4 meters x 6 meters. First, use a rope to pull the two floating ice pegs back together. If the two floating ice can be pieced together, that would be great. He used the grass ball in his hand to first synthesize two long grass ropes, one of which was worried about being pulled apart. Quickly, the synthesis is complete. Find out if there are any iron nails or similar things, and you can synthesize iron nails with just one piece of metal. Combine 4. After finishing, Chen Mo first picked up the iron nail and nailed it to the edge of the old floating ice. Bang! Oh my! Chen Mo! Are you going to kill me? Hold on, I'll fix it for you later. Is this really a matter of tolerance? Chen Mo simply ignored it and continued to nail it carefully. Accompanied by the crying curses of the old floating ice, both iron nails were nailed in, but one nail was nailed too hard midway, causing the ice to shatter and forcing it to be nailed again. So, a total of 3 holes were chiseled on the old ice floe. It seems we must be careful when smashing it. Bah! Do you still know, kid? Chen Mo ignored the old floating ice and quickly tied the grass rope to the nail, even pulling it. Ouch ouch ouch! Ancestors! It hurts so much. Hold on. Chen Mo vaguely heard a suppressed laughter and looked over to see 2 rafts leaning next to him. Do they also know how to gloat? Chen Mo shook his head, pulled one of the rafts onto the floating ice, climbed onto the other raft, grabbed the grass rope, and rowed with a small wooden paddle, approaching the pirate's floating ice. At this moment, the 2 ice floes are approaching the closest distance, so we must hurry up and nail the nails and tie the grass rope. He jumped onto the floating ice and tried to nail it as carefully as possible. Unexpectedly, the floating ice remained motionless. It seems that not everything can speak. That's good, there's no need to make such a noise in your ears. Chen Mo quickly nailed the nails, tied the grass rope, and 2 pieces of floating ice were tied together. The rope gradually stretched straight, but did not break. He breathed a sigh of relief and jumped onto the raft, rowing it back onto the old ice floe. The old man moaned and sucked like a toothache. Chen Mo didn't want to harm it, but there was really no other way. You can hold on a little longer and it will be over soon. Ouch, ouch. I believe you're a ghost, you little bastard, ouch, ouch. Amidst the curses of the old ice floe, Chen Mo slowly pulled the ice floe over. At this moment, he had the time to take a good look at the supplies on the floating ice. At first glance, Chen Mo was happy, and the grass balls were almost gathered together. Chapter 10, When an Ice Block Says It Has Eggs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the pirate's floating ice, there are over 20 grass balls and 2 completed grass mats. In addition, there are also scattered other supplies. As for the barbecue pile on top, it was directly dismantled into materials by Chen Mo. Now to combine 2 pieces of floating ice together, fresh water is needed as the adhesive. Among the materials he seized, there was a small iron basin. 2 small iron basins were placed together on the grill to melt the broken ice, which doubled the efficiency. Organize all the supplies, Chen Mo values those 2 rafts the most. With a raft, you can chase after the ice when salvaging it, and catch a lot of more ice. Just thinking of this, a large block of ice approached not far away. Chen Mo jumped directly onto the raft and used 2 small wooden paddles together, quickly approaching the ice block. Run, run, run. Someone's catching us, catching us. Help, help, help. Obviously, this wave of ice blocks is not compatible. So what? This pile of ice cubes is small in quantity, less than 20 in total. There's no need to worry about getting information, just salvage them all. Chen Mo approached the ice and placed a small wooden paddle on the raft, catching a piece of ice with a fishing net all at once. With a bang, ice fell on the raft, causing it to shake violently. A new problem has arisen. This raft is too small, about 2 square meters, it can't hold so many ice cubes at all. The supplies are too heavy and there is a risk of sinking. Gone. Make such a small raft for Mao. Chen Mo had no choice but to salvage 7 or 8 yuan and then row the raft back. The rest will have to float closer and be salvaged on the floating ice anyway. He had just loaded the ice onto the floating ice when another pile of ice arrived on the sea surface. Chen Mo continued to salvage, with more than 10 bangs. Ice fell onto the raft, and in the end, there were 2 fish that missed the net. Chen Mo immediately sat on the raft and chased after them, solving the problem in 2 fell swoops. Perfect. Chen Mo increasingly felt that rafts were very important. He didn't have a composite diagram of rafts, so these 2 rafts must be well maintained and dragged onto the floating ice after finishing their work. Due to too many supplies and the weight of 2 rafts, the old floating ice feels overwhelmed. Chen Mo. You should expand it quickly, otherwise I will really sink. Chen Mo looked towards the edge and realized that his old friend had not deceived him this time. The sea water was less than 5 centimeters away from the top edge of the floating ice, and a little wave could capture it. At this point, the broken ice on the barbecue grill has melted into fresh water. Chin Duan picked up a basin and joined 2 pieces of floating ice. Quickly, my own 4 meters x 5 meters of floating ice merged with the pirate's 2 meters x 3 meters of floating ice. But the shape is a bit strange. Chen Mo brought broken ice and continued to expand it, eventually expanding the floating ice to 6 meters x 8 meters, about a quarter of a basketball court, which was very spacious. The ice cubes salvaged have not been processed yet, and Chen Mo began to decompose them one by one. Obtained, crushed ice x2, wood x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, grass clump x1. Obtained, crushed ice x2, combustible ice x1. Flammable ice. If I remember correctly, this thing is called solid gas and can burn. He immediately checked the item description. Combustible ice. Description: it can serve as fuel, has high combustion efficiency, needs to be stored in sealed containers, and can serve as energy for special equipment. It's uncomfortable to need a sealed container. Chen Mo checked the synthesis interface and found that he couldn't create any related items, otherwise. Just burn it down. Chen Mo didn't rush to throw it into the grill. After breaking down all the ice, he found 5 clumps of grass left on hand. Chow Tan is now a hard currency, sell it. He immediately opened the communication channel and sent a message. Chen Mo, grass balls for sale. Private message needed. I want magic cryolite. Magic crystals. What kind of thing is that? I've never seen them before. Boss. Can I trade 2 small sea fish? I trade using composite images. My friend, I have a pearl, 1 inch big. The instant communication channel exploded, but no one sold magic cryolite. In this case, if you still can't receive it, it means that the entire game world hasn't exploded with a few magic cryolites. This is very uncomfortable. If you can't gather enough 5 magic ice crystals, you can't make an ice crystal hammer. If you can't make an ice crystal hammer, you can't break down the magical and colorful ice blocks. Chen Mo looked at the ice cubes emitting colorful light and felt an itch in his heart. Forget it. Anyway, let's see if there are any other good things. Chen Mo's private message had already flashed. He opened the first one to check. It was a seller of composite images. Friend. Can I trade 5 grass balls using a table to create a composite image? At present, the table seems to be of little use. He didn't reply, he just checked the next one. Boss, I want 10 grass balls to trade with crabs. They're very fresh. Let's forget about the food. Chen Mo flipped back several times and suddenly his eyes lit up. Brother, I have the magic cryolite you need, 2 pieces. Exchange it for 20 grass balls. Surprisingly, there are ice crystals, and there are only 2 of them. Chen Mo immediately replied to the news. Chen Mo, it's too expensive to have 20 grass balls for 2, it's cheaper. Don't be joking. If it weren't for things like grass balls, I would sell them. Only 20 servings. Chen Mo, 10 servings. It's too much to offer a 50% discount when you meet. It's impossible. Chen Mo, it's almost dark now, believe me, you can't trade so many grass balls. The quantity I gave you is already very high. That's too much of a loss. If you don't have grass balls, give me something else. Obviously, the other party is also aware that no one can come up with so many grass balls now, they have to keep making grass mats to keep warm. Chen Mo thought for a moment and felt that the other party would probably not easily let go. Instead, it would be better to sell him the piece of combustible ice that is difficult to store. Chen Mo, I'll add a piece of combustible ice. Flammable ice. Chen Mo, fuel, you don't have enough straw mats, you definitely need more fire, right? This. Chen Mo, I'll leave it at that. If you don't trade with me, you won't be able to buy 10 grass balls. Special. Alright. Deal. Hurry up. Perfect. Chen Mo immediately chose to trade, and as soon as the trading information was sent, a prompt popped up. Successful transaction. Obtained, Magic Crystals X2. Great. Being able to trade 2 ice crystals has greatly exceeded expectations. As long as there is another wave of ice, I will make up for the shortfall of 5 grass balls every minute. Looking up, an ice block was approaching in the distance. It will take some more time. Chen Mo took advantage of this time to turn all the grass balls into grass mats. 5 in total. When sleeping, there are 3 floors up and 3 floors down, and there is still 1 more floor left. And after salvaging this wave of ice, we can start building the ice house. Chen Mo smiled slightly, pushed the raft into the water, and rowed towards the ice block. Get me, get me, get me. I have ice, I have ice. I have eggs, I have eggs.